Hi, and welcome to the Home Assistant running on Synology in Docker. Today we will be installing ZoneMinder, video surveillance software. We'll start in a couple of seconds. Before we begin today's episode, I really would like to thank all the members who have joined my channel. Thank you very much, your support really means a lot. And now, let's get back to video. In this video, I will be covering steps on how to install ZoneMinder. In my personal opinion, this is one of the best open source surveillance softwares. I have been using it for some time. Well, I'm not using it currently, but I was using it for more than 10 years, and I did mention it a couple of times during my streams. There are a lot of cameras that you can use with ZoneMinder, no matter if they are old type CCTV cams, IPTV cams, or even USB cams, and I did use them all, from CCTV up to USB. One of the other great functionalities of the ZoneMinder, especially if you compare it with the, for example, Synology surveillance station, is that you have really a great ability to customize how motion detection is done. Blending of the images. For example, what percentage of the image should be blended into pattern to avoid false positives. Today I will not be going into a lot of details in regard to ZoneMinder, but we will cover everything needed to install it inside the Docker, to get it up and running and get one camera working, and of course to install it and integrate it with the Home Assistant. So let's get started. First thing that we have to do is we have to open PuTTY. In PuTTY, you have to go and open session to your Synology or any other server that is running Docker. For me, this is of course Synology. Let me open Builder Core. And now we have to log in here. What we have to do now is we have to create two folders. One folder will be used where we want to keep our configuration files, and the other folder will be data files. I think that if I remember correctly, this one will be then used to host recordings from the cameras itself. So let's get cracking with the creation of such folders. First will be mkdir for make directory, volume 1, Docker, ZoneMinder. And next we will copy the same command and just add data at the end. So we now have two folders. Before we proceed with anything else, we will type command ID to see what is the user ID and group ID for this user. So in the next command, I have to type in 1026 for UID and 100 for the GID. GID is group ID. This is user ID. Let's clear the screen. And let's start typing very long command. Sudo, because we need to do this with the elevated user rights. Docker run. Then we'll put flag D for daemon to run it independently from our console. We will give it a name. And name will be ZoneMinder. For the network, we will be using bridge network. Yes, it's possible for this container to also run in the host network environment, but since I presume that you already have a lot of other containers, and since you're running this on a Synology, to avoid any kind of a problem with the port mapping, it will be definitely easier for us to do it with the bridge network. So we will now start typing the p command for the ports. What we have to do here, we have to map external, meaning the port that we can use from our home network, with the internal container port. First thing will be port to access the ZoneMinder web page or user interface, and I've selected this to be 8223, so it's 8223, and we will map it with the internal port 80. If you, for example, want to use secure connections between the ZoneMinder and your PCs on the network or outside of your network, then you would here map it with the port 443. But since I want to do a quick and simple installation, I will avoid this part and will be using only port 80, non-secure port. Next, we want to allow this only for the TCP type of the connection. Second port is port 9223, and this will be mapped with internal port 9000. Once again, for TCP connections only. Next step is to define the time zone. Once again, I will be using the same time zone, the one that I'm living, so it's Europe, Zagreb. Here we will start typing commands that we normally do not use or I haven't used previously in the videos that I've been recording. First command will be privilege, privileged equals true. Privileged is not something that is recommended to do when you are running containers because it allows low-level access to the system, and it means that if your container is compromised, it can then easily compromise the whole system. But for this container, we need it. Next, we will use environment variable for the shared memory, shmem equals, let's open quote, 50%. Let's close the quote. Next, we have to define the variable for our user and group ID. For this, we will be using output from the ID command we ran previously. So it's PUID equals 1026. Remember that you have to use variables that your system gave you. And the other command or other variable will be PGID equals 100. Again, for me. You can get here, for example, 1000 or something like that. So please remember to match this with what your system gave you as output. Now comes the fun part. There are now a couple of variables that you can here either enable or disable that will enable or disable built-in functionality of the ZoneMinder. So ZoneMinder itself is the NVR, meaning the network video recorder, but this version that we will be installing also has some add-ons on it. It has face recognition, it has object recognition, it has ability to use webhooks. So if you want to enable or disable this functionality, you can use the following commands. Remember that in the description of the video you will have URL link to the GitHub page, and on the GitHub page you can see some other functionalities that I have not included in this URL. Let's start with the webhook. So E for variable, install hook equals 1, because we want to enable webhooks. I will not be using them in this video, but by enabling them I have option to later on use webhooks either to get information or push information to the ZoneMinder. Next, here we can type install YOLO. I will disable it for this video. What YOLO is, it's you only look once method of detecting objects or faces on the images. If you want to learn more about YOLO, tiny YOLO and things like that, I recommend that you go over the internet and read up the documentation. Basically what it does is, I will not go into details, but when you want to detect something on the image, you have to divide image into the squares, then you have to check against each and every square to see if there is object, then when you find the object you have to scan it once again to see if that object matches the pattern that you have recorded previously or saved previously or not. YOLO is different. YOLO means, as I said, you only look once. At the same time, the overall page is looked, all the objects on the page are detected if they can be detected, and then each object itself is to be detected if this is a face from the person 1 or person 2. But as I said, this will be disabled. We can now type install tiny YOLO. Again, I will using here 0, meaning do not install. You have then option to, for example, install face for face recognition. But as I said, this all will be disabled this video. If there is a lot of interest in that, I may be persuaded to do a separate video on each one of those. So let's say that we are now finished with more or less everything to get it to the point where it needs to start and save the data. But we still haven't mapped the folders. So let's first create connection between the internal configuration folder and the first folder we created. So it's volume 1 Docker ZoneMinder with the internal folder config, and we will give it read and write access. Next, we will map the data folder. So this will be volume 1 Docker ZoneMinder data mapped with the internal var for variable cache ZoneMinder. And once again, we'll be using read write. The last part of the command is the name of the image we want to download, and this will be dlandon ZoneMinder. The command is now done. The next step for me is to press enter. Enter the password. Well, that depends on if I will be asked for it or not. And wait. During the first installation I did when I was testing this, it took almost 15 minutes for everything to be downloaded, extracted, and started properly inside the Docker container. So let's press enter. This part is now done. It has been downloaded, extracted, and installed. Let's go to Synology and look what's happening there inside Docker. Let's open Docker, container. Let's double click here, log, and as you can see here, things are still getting installed. I'll give this couple of more minutes so everything finishes up installing correctly. Let's refresh, and by the looks of this, ZoneMinder watch is up, filter is up, update is up, stats is up. And we should now type the web address for our ZoneMinder, and this is the IP address of the Synology on the port 8223-ZM for ZoneMinder. And here it is. ZoneMinder has started. Before we can continue, you must accept privacy terms and click on the apply. And here it is. We now have ZoneMinder running on the Synology inside the Docker. Okay, so this is the ZoneMinder. The current version at the time of the recording is version 1.34.22. I will not be going into all details here because ZoneMinder is a very complex system, but we will cover some basics. First of all, I want to add a camera so that we can have something to play with. Let's click on the add button here. And this is the window where you add new cameras. Although this is the main window or general area, we need to go to source to specify the source for our stream. And here, once again, we will be using the same URL stream we have used previously in Home Assistant when we were setting up real-time cameras. Let me paste it here. So the stream is the RTSP with the username, password, at the IP address of the camera on the port 554, and we will be once again using the main stream because we have main and substream. Method will be TCP. There are some options you can specify here. I will leave them blank. If you need help with the options or any other value where there is a question mark, click on it and the pop-up screen will show you what types of the options you have. We will leave everything here as is, and for the resolution we will select, let me find it here, this one. We will preserve the aspect ratio, orientation, everything. We will give it a name, Reolink. Nodes will be blank, server will be auto. What we'll be using, we will be using FFmpeg. And here comes the fun part with the ZoneMinder. If you remember, Synology has 3 states. It has recording, motion detection, and just plain monitoring. As you can see, ZoneMinder has a couple of options. If you select none, the camera will be disabled. Monitor will just provide you with image from the camera, but it will not be recorded. Mode detect, it will be recorded only when there is motion detected. Record, Mocord, and No DEteCT. When I was using ZoneMinder, I either used monitor, motion detect, or record. For this, I will be selecting monitor because my system, as always, is a recording system and it doesn't have too much resources. There are some other options, for example, where do you want to store them, how do you want to store them, timestamps, how they are formatted, buffers for pre-record or pre-event or post-event. This is the image count, not the seconds, but the image count, and things like that. Control is used for the pan tilt cameras. And here are the miscellaneous options. For example, formatting, you can embed EXIF information inside the image, scaling, etc. Let me save this. And if everything is correct, we should now have here new camera. It's still red, meaning it's still not connected. We need to have status green, meaning that the camera itself has been connected successfully. Let me press here on the name. And here is the image from my camera. What other options you have? Well, ZoneMinder is not as intuitive, for example, as a Synology surveillance station. Probably Blue Iris has more options, but if you want to use free, open source software, one of the best options, in my opinion, is ZoneMinder. Let's talk about graphical user interface. Well, it's not that pretty, but it's working. Here you can see the status of ZoneMinder. Currently it's running. You can restart or stop it here. The version itself is here. This icon plus text shows what is the current quality of the stream between the camera, ZoneMinder, and yourself. Currently it is high, but you can change it to medium or low. Here you have the name of the camera. You can see here the function of the camera. As I said, it's currently monitoring. Here is the current frame rate. This is the IP address or the source of the camera stream itself. And if you have any kind of motion detections or things like that, here is where you will see the events. This is the total number of events. This is the events in the last hour, day, week, month, and the ones that are archived. Let's look at the options. As I said, there are tons of options and I will definitely not go through all of them. So here are some basic things. What I would definitely recommend is for you to use authenticate user logins to ZoneMinder. To use either remote or built-in. The built-in is the easiest one. And if you do that, you also need to create separate users. Then we have config. Here you have options on how to improve your stream or the performance of the system. For example, use or not use CPU extensions, fast image blends, strict video configuration, etc. etc. API, if you need to have API access somewhere. Servers, but we do not have any other servers, so nope, nothing here. Storage, if you need, you can add additional storage here. Web, this is the web interface, how it's called, what is the URL, and things like that. Images, this is how the images themselves are presented to the viewer. For example, you can colorize the grayscale, you can change the format of the streams. Logging, network, if you need to set up email integration, or if you want to have uploads for your events. If you have X10 protocol devices, here is how you can hook them up. And these three are the settings for the quality of the streams. So this is the high, you have medium and low. And here are the options for each one of them. Okay, let's go to groups. Groups allows you to group individual, let's call it like that, cameras or capture devices. Filters can be used to filter out the events based on the time, number of alarm frames, etc. Cycle is used as a montage view, meaning that if you have multiple cameras, they will be swapping up images after a couple of seconds, depending on how you set it up. And montage, of course, is the same, where you have multiple cameras displayed on one screen. Let's go back to console. So now we have ZoneMinder running on our Docker. The next step for us is to add it to Home Assistant, and adding it up is pretty straightforward, but for that we need to go back to Home Assistant itself. In Home Assistant, what we need to do? First of all, we need to create integration for the ZoneMinder. Then we need to add ZoneMinder as a source for cameras. Next step we need to add is a sensor for the ZoneMinder. And the third thing that we want to add is a switch. Let's get started. Open up Visual Studio Code or file editor or whatever text editor you are using for your Home Assistant configuration. Go to configuration YAML file. And at the bottom of the file, what I do is I always add comment ZoneMinder. We will add ZoneMinder integration. It will be ZoneMinder. Here we need to type host. This is the IP address of our server, and we need to type in the IP address. So in my case, this is the IP address of my Synology, because inside Docker I have ZoneMinder running 192.168.1.202 with the port. If you remember, we use port 8223. This was the only step needed for the ZoneMinder integration. Next step is to add cameras. Let me find where other cameras are located. So these are the old cameras. Here at the bottom, ZoneMinder. I will add integration with the ZoneMinder system to pull the cameras out. Platform. And we will type here ZoneMinder. Since we already have integration ZoneMinder defined, the system itself knows that it will be going to the ZoneMinder integration to find the stream for each individual camera you have there. So we are done with the configuration YAML file. Next step is to go to sensor YAML file. Inside sensor YAML file, go to the bottom of the file and add following. Once again, I will be putting here comment ZoneMinder platform ZoneMinder. You have here a couple of options. First is include archived. I will type here false, which is also default value, so you don't need to type it here if you do not want. What this will do, this will not include any archived event in the sensor listing. Meaning that if you have thousands and thousands of events, and if you archive more or less all of them, only the events that are not archived will be listed by the sensor. Next thing, which is optional, is to add monitored conditions. Monitored conditions. And here you can list all, which will of course give you all the events the system has. Or you can type some other value, for example, month, week, day, or hour. Or any combination. For example, I want only to see events in the last hour and in the last month. But since I also do not want to specify that, I want to get every event, I will leave this out. And the last thing for us is to include a switch. Let's go to switch YAML file. I'll start by writing here the comment ZoneMinder platform ZoneMinder. Let me fix typo here. What is the purpose of this switch? Well, we want to have a switch where we can change the status of the camera, or better to call it how the camera works. If you remember, I've set it up as a monitor only. But what if I want to, for any reason, start motion detect from the Home Assistant? This is where the switch comes into play. Command on will be Modect for motion detect, and command off will be monitor. And now if I turn this switch on, it will turn the camera or ZoneMinder to state motion detect, and if I turn this switch off, it will set the condition for the camera to just monitor. Some other functions that you can set here, of course, is record, Mocord or Nodect. We are done here. We need to save this. Let's go to configuration, server control, check configuration, and let's restart our Home Assistant. I really do hope that you enjoyed this video so far. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any kind of a comment or a question, or if I didn't cover something that you think that I should be covering, you can leave this in the comment section below, or you can contact me via the Discord server. Let's go to Developer Tools. Let's go to Services. And here we should have a new service called ZoneMinder Set Run State. What you can do here is you can change that state which we showed previously, so this is a stop or restart. Okay, but let's add the camera now. Let's go to Overview, let's go to Camera, and here we will be adding our ZoneMinder cameras, or camera in my case. Let's click on the three dots, Edit Dashboard, Add. Let's type here Picture. Let's use Picture Glance. Camera will be a real link. This is the name of the camera that we've given it to the inside the ZoneMinder. Let's change this to Auto. 3D printer. And here let's add the switch, also called real link, where we will be able to turn the camera recording on and off. Let's press save. What we also have, let's press plus here, entities, and real link status. Let's remove this. Camera status. Save. So what we have here now, we have camera that's been streamed from the ZoneMinder. We have option here to start the recording. And here we will see if there are any events. Nothing here. And what is the current status of the real camera. As you can see, the status has now changed to recording. And we have here status mode detect. Let's turn it off. And as you can see, now we have here also real link status monitor. More or less this is it in terms of integration. Of course, feel free to customize it to your own needs. You can add more cameras. You can use this switch to change between some other conditions, between, for example, motion detect or record, and things like that. And this is it for this 25th video in the series of Home Assistant running on Synology inside Docker. If you have any kind of a comment or a question in regard to this video or any other previous video, you can always find me on the Discord server, but feel free to leave comment down in the comment section below. If you still haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell button so you get notified on the future updates, and I'll be seeing you next time. Until then, bye bye and have fun!